She was wiping down tables in a quiet diner when a bruised, pregnant woman sprinted inside, eyes wide, lip bleeding, whispering, "Please, help me." Before Elena could react, the woman's husband kicked the door open so hard the windows shook. He demanded his wife back. He threatened anyone who stood in his way. Elena stepped between them, and with trembling fingers, she made one phone call she'd been told never to use unless it was life or death. 2 minutes later, the ground outside began to rumble. Sunlight flashed off chrome. 70 Hell's Angels rolled into the parking lot in broad daylight, and what they did next turned a diner waitress into someone untouchable. Subscribe to Heart Tales, because the truth behind this moment will shock you. Let's check in. 1 for first-time viewer, 2 if you've seen a few, 3 if you never miss. The lunch rush at Miller's Diner had barely begun when the heat outside pressed hard against the windows, turning every pane of glass into a white shimmer. Elena Ward moved through the dining room with practiced grace, balancing plates and coffee pots while sunlight streaked across the floor. It should have been an ordinary midday shift, the kind she'd lived 100 times before, customers chatting, the radio humming, the smell of frying onions thick in the air, but ordinary shattered the moment the door burst open. A woman stumbled inside, clutching her stomach with both arms, her face white with terror. Her clothes were smeared with dirt, her cheeks swollen, her lip bleeding. She looked like she'd run through fire to get here. The few customers at the counter froze, forks suspended mid-air. Elena didn't freeze. She saw everything all at once, the trembling hands, the uneven breaths, the stretch of her shirt across a pregnant belly. The woman's voice cracked as she whispered, "Please, someone help me." Elena was at her side before anyone else moved. She caught her shoulders, easing her into a booth. "What's your name?" she asked softly. "Maria," the woman rasped. "Maria Torres." Elena reached for her wrist to check her pulse, but Maria flinched violently, pulling her arm back. That's when Elena saw the bruises, fresh, dark, fingerprint-shaped. Something cold slid into the center of her chest. She knew those marks. She had worn those same shapes once, years ago, when her own life had belonged to fear. Maria grabbed Elena's apron, desperation sharpening her voice. "He's coming. He's right behind me. Please don't let him take me." Elena swallowed hard, glancing toward the door, bathed in harsh daylight. "Who's coming?" "My husband," Maria whispered. "Victor." The name hit the diner like a dart. 2 truckers at the counter exchanged uneasy looks. Someone muttered under their breath. It wasn't a normal reaction. It was the kind reserved for a name connected to violence, reputation, danger, something that lived beyond ordinary fear. Elena steadied her breath. "You're safe here," she said, though she wasn't entirely sure it was true. Maria shook her head, tears sliding down her bruised cheek. "You don't understand. He'll find me." And, as if summoned by the words, a shadow moved across the front windows. Elena's spine locked. Sunlight flashed off something metal, perhaps a belt buckle or a ring, and the steps approaching the door were slow, deliberate, far too confident for a man whose wife had just run for her life. The diner fell silent. The door swung open with a crack that made every customer flinch. Victor Torres filled the doorway, broad shoulders silhouetted against the burning midday sun. His shirt was wrinkled, his jaw clenched, his eyes bloodshot with rage. He scanned the room once, and when he found Maria trembling in the booth, his lips curled into something between a smile and a snarl. "There you are," he said. Maria whimpered. Elena stepped instinctively in front of her, though her hands trembled. Victor tilted his head at Elena, amused. "Move." But Elena didn't move. Not this time. Not ever again. Elena didn't know where the courage came from. Maybe from the memory of her own bruises. Maybe from the way Maria clung to her sleeve like she was the last scrap of safety left in the world. Or maybe because Victor Torres walked into that diner like he owned every breath inside it, but she stood her ground. Victor stepped farther into the light, the sun catching the sweat on his temples and the rage burning in his eyes. Every customer shrank back. The cook froze behind the grill. Even the radio seemed to lower its volume, swallowing its own music. Victor's boots thudded against the floor with deliberate weight, each step a reminder that he was used to getting exactly what he wanted, exactly when he wanted it.
"I said move," he repeated, slower now, dark amusement curling into his voice.
"This is between me and my wife." Elena's pulse hammered so loudly she thought the whole room could hear it, but she didn't step aside. "She's hurt. She's pregnant. You're not taking her anywhere." Victor's smile disappeared. "You don't get to tell me what to do." He leaned in, breath thick with anger. "I know you, the waitress who thinks she's a hero." Elena held his stare. "No, I'm just not a coward." A muscle jumped along Victor's jaw. Behind Elena, Maria whispered, "Please don't let him." Victor lifted his hand, not to strike Elena, but to silence Maria with a gesture she clearly recognized. She recoiled instantly. It made Elena's stomach twist. He shifted his attention back to Elena. "Move, or I'll move you." For one terrifying second, she thought he really might. His hand twitched, his weight shifted forward. The heat pouring through the diner windows seemed to thicken the air between them, but Elena wasn't alone in this room. One of the truckers, an older man with sunburned forearms, rose slowly from his stool. "Leave the girl be," he muttered. Victor's head snapped toward him. "Sit down." The man sat. It was enough to show Elena that no one here could stop Victor. Except her. She stepped closer, her voice steadying. "You need to leave." Victor stared at her like he was deciding whether she was worth breaking. For a moment, Elena felt the same cold fear that had lived in her bones years ago, the kind that told her she was too small to make a difference. Then Maria whispered something so small, so fragile, that it sliced through the heat. "Please, help me." That was the moment Elena made her choice. She turned her back on Victor, wrapped her hand gently around Maria's arm and whispered, "Come with me." She guided her toward the kitchen door, toward the narrow hallway behind the diner that would put another wall between them and the man who wanted to drag her back into a nightmare. Victor took one step forward. Elena spun back toward him. "Don't," she said, not loudly, not dramatically, but with a kind of cold finality that made the room hold its breath. Victor's eyes narrowed to slits. "You think someone's coming for you?" Elena didn't look away. She didn't say the name out loud, but she remembered the number in her pocket. The number she'd been told to use only if she ever needed real help. The kind that arrived on roaring engines and didn't ask for permission. Victor laughed quietly, not understanding. No one's coming. But Elena already felt the decision solidifying in her chest. Heavy, dangerous, irreversible. Someone was coming. And when they did, Victor Torres would regret ever stepping into this diner. Elena pushed through the swinging kitchen door with Maria clinging to her arm, the bright midday light fading behind them as the narrow hallway swallowed them into shadow. The smell of onions and fryer oil thickened the air, but all Elena could hear was Maria's ragged breathing and the faint thud of Victor's boots pacing on the diner floor. She guided Maria into the tiny supply room, shutting the door softly behind them. Sunlight leaked in through a small vent high on the wall, painting narrow bars of light across the shelves, stacked with cans and paper towels. Maria slid to the floor, her hands pressed protectively over her stomach. Tears streaked through the dust on her cheeks. "He won't stop," she whispered. "He always finds me." Elena crouched down, forcing her own panic to stay buried beneath the surface. "You're safe with me," she said, but even she knew the walls of a diner wouldn't hold off a man like Victor Torres. Not for long, not today. Maria looked up at her with eyes full of terror and something worse, resignation. "You don't understand who he is." Elena swallowed. "I don't need to know who he is. I know what he is." Maria flinched at a sudden sharp noise, a fist striking metal. Victor had moved to the kitchen door. He was close. Too close. "Elena," he shouted, voice vibrating through the wall. "Open this door right now!" Maria's breathing turned into desperate gasps. "Please don't let him take me. Please." Elena reached into her apron with shaking hands until her fingers found the slip of paper she had carried for years. The ink had faded, the edges worn, but the number printed on it felt as heavy as a weapon, a number she'd been given long ago by a woman who had simply said, "If you're ever in danger again, call this. Don't hesitate, don't ask questions." Elena had never dialed it, not once, not even for herself. Victor pounded on the kitchen door again, harder this time. "Do you hear me? Don't make me come back there." Maria pressed both hands over her belly as if bracing for impact. "He'll kill me," she choked. "He said he'd kill me and take the baby." The words snapped something inside Elena. She pulled out her phone. Her thumb hovered over the number, one she had memorized even without looking. Her breath trembled, but her resolve didn't break. She hit call. The ring barely reached a single chime before someone picked up. A deep voice answered, steady as stone. "Elena." Her knees nearly gave out. "Gabriel, I need help. It's urgent." Silence, a tense, heavy silence. "Then are you hurt?" "No," she whispered. "But she is. A pregnant woman. Her husband, he's out there trying to take her. I can't hold him off." Another beat of silence. Then Gabriel Maddox spoke with a calm that didn't match the storm Elena heard building behind it. "Where are you?" "Miller's Diner. Back hallway." The voice sharpened, not loud, not emotional, but deadly precise. "Don't let her leave with him." Elena exhaled shakily, the weight of his words sinking in. "Okay, we're on our way. How many?" Elena whispered before she could stop herself. "You'll hear us," he replied. The call cut. Elena stared at the phone, heart pounding, as Maria whispered, "Who was that?" And before Elena could answer, Victor slammed his fist into the kitchen door again, so hard the hinges rattled, but Elena wasn't afraid anymore, because help was coming, and it wouldn't be quiet. Victor's pounding grew louder, angrier, each blow rattling the metal door like it was made of tin. Elena pressed her palm against the supply room wall, feeling the vibrations pulse through her bones. Maria curled tighter on the floor, arms wrapped around her stomach as though she could shield the life inside her with sheer will. "Elena!" Victor roared, voice cracking with fury. "Open this door before I break it down!" Elena knew he meant it. She could hear it in the unhinged edge of his voice, the same kind she remembered from nights she spent praying someone would intervene. But this time, she wasn't the one running. And this time, she wasn't alone. She helped Maria rise to her knees. "Just a little longer," she whispered. "They're coming." "Who's coming?" Maria breathed, shaking. "No one can stop him." Elena swallowed hard, looking toward the hallway as if she could see through the walls, through time itself, into the distance where help was already moving. "You're wrong," she said softly. "There's someone." Victor's fist slammed again. This time the door bent, a small dent, barely visible, but enough to make Elena's heart seize. She glanced around the cramped room. No weapon, no escape, only a window vent too high to reach, and a door that wouldn't survive another minute of Victor's rage. He kicked the door. The hinges groaned. "Elena!" he barked. "I'm done playing," Maria whimpered, gripping Elena's arm with surprising strength. "Don't let him take me," she whispered. "He'll kill me. He almost did this morning." Elena knelt beside her, her voice steady though her hands trembled. "Listen to me. Look at me." Maria lifted her tear-streaked face. "You're not going back out there," Elena said. "Not while I'm breathing." Another violent kick. The metal shrieked. The door bowed inward. Maria cried out. Elena grasped her shoulders. "Hold on, just hold on." Then the pounding stopped. Silence flooded the hallway, sudden and unnatural, pressing against Elena's ears until she wondered if she had imagined it. Then she heard it. A sound so low, at first it felt like a distant rumble, like thunder rolling under the earth. The floor beneath her vibrated. The supply room shelves trembled. Maria's breath caught in her throat. "What is that?" she whispered. Elena stood slowly, staring toward the kitchen door as the sound grew louder. Thick, heavy, rhythmic. Engines, lots of engines. Victor froze on the other side of the metal door. She heard his steps shift, confusion slicing into his bravado. "What the hell?" The engines grew louder, swelling into a single tidal roar that shook dust from the ceiling, the kind of sound that swallowed every street in its path, the kind of sound that made windows tremble and air vibrate. Sunlight flashed under the door. A shadow passed by. More shadows followed. Dozens. Then, the unmistakable scream of tires skidding onto gravel. Victor cursed. "No, no, no, no." Elena's pulse steadied for the first time since Maria had stumbled into the diner. "They're here," she whispered. Victor backed away from the kitchen. Boots scrambling, shouts erupted outside. Doors slammed. Engines revved in unison. One deafening wave of power rolling into the small-town diner like a declaration. Maria's eyes widened, trembling. Who are they?" Elena exhaled, the breath she'd been holding for years finally leaving her chest. "Hell's angels," she said quietly. 70 of them. And in the silence before the first bike screeched to a stop outside the diner's front door, she added, "And they're not here for you." The roar outside rose to a violent crescendo, shaking the thin diner walls until the salt shakers rattled on the tables. Sunlight poured through the front windows in sharp flashing bursts, reflecting off chrome, metal, and moving helmets. It didn't sound like a group arriving. It sounded like a force descending. Victor stumbled backward from the kitchen, eyes wide, breath broken. For the first time since he'd entered the diner, he wasn't the predator. He looked like a man, suddenly realizing he'd stepped into the wrong world. The engines cut all at once. Silence slammed into the diner so heavy it made the fluorescents hum. Then came the footsteps, measured, unified. Dozens of boots hitting the ground at the same rhythm. A formation, not a mob, a unit. Sunlight stretching long shadows across the diner floor as the first figures moved past the windows, enough to darken half the room. Victor's voice cracked. "No, this isn't possible. He wouldn't call them." Elena stepped from the hallway, positioning herself between him and the kitchen door. "You didn't give him a choice." The diner door swung open. Bright daylight exploded into the room, outlining a single figure in the doorway. Gabriel Maddox didn't need to say a word. His presence said it for him. Shoulders squared, jaw set, eyes cold under the harsh sun. Behind him, rows of riders spread across the parking lot, engines cooling, leather cuts gleaming with the same red and white patch Victor once wore on his back. Gabriel stepped inside, and the entire diner shrank around him. Every customer froze. Even the buzzing neon sign above the counter seemed to dim. Victor tried to speak, but the words choked in his throat. "Gabriel, this is between me and my wife." Gabriel's boots thudded against the linoleum once, twice, until he stood directly in front of Victor. He didn't shove him, didn't touch him, just looked at him, a look so sharp it could have cut metal. "You put your hands on a woman," Gabriel said quietly. Victor swallowed. Sweat trickled down his temple. "You put your hands on a pregnant woman." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "My pregnant woman!" The entire diner gasped as the truth hit the air like a dropped match in gasoline. Maria Torres wasn't just a battered wife. She wasn't just a victim. She was the wife of the president of the Hells Angels. Victor stumbled back, hitting a table. She wasn't supposed to. She wasn't supposed to tell you. She didn't. Gabriel's voice was calm, but it rattled the glasses behind the counter. Elena did. Victor's head snapped toward her, hatred flaring, but only for a heartbeat, because the moment he moved, 70 riders rose behind Gabriel, their shadows stretching across the pavement, ready to enter, ready to close in. Gabriel leaned forward slightly. "You broke the only rule we never forgive." Victor shook his head wildly. "Gabriel, please!" Gabriel cut him off with a single word. "Patch!" And from behind him, Silas Kane stepped inside, holding Victor's cut in his hands, the leather folded, the patch still attached, the symbol of a brotherhood. Victor no longer deserved. Elena didn't breathe. No one did. Because they all knew what came next. Silas Kane laid the cut on the nearest counter, unfolding it with deliberate precision. The late afternoon sun poured through the diner windows, catching the red and white patch stitched onto the leather. It glowed like a warning flare, a symbol of honor. Victor no longer had any right to wear. Victor's breathing quickened. His hands shook. "Wait, Gabriel, don't do this. We can talk." "There's nothing left to talk about," Gabriel said, still calm, but with a finality that landed like a hammer. "You touched her." "It was a mistake." Victor's voice cracked. "I was drunk. I wasn't thinking." Gabriel stepped closer, shadows gathering around him like armor. "If you were a stranger, I'd end this in the parking lot." He paused, eyes narrowing with something colder than anger. "But you were a brother, and that makes what you did worse." Victor backed up so quickly he stumbled into the counter. A salt shaker toppled and shattered on the floor, but the sharp sound barely registered over the tension choking the room. Silas approached, lifting the cut. "You know what happens next," he said quietly. Victor pressed himself against the counter. No, Silas, you can't. Don't take that from me. Don't you dare." Silas didn't break eye contact. "You took something first." He reached out. Victor jerked away. 2 riders stepped through the doorway, blocking his escape. Sunlight framed their silhouettes, making them look larger than life. Gabriel nodded once. Silas grabbed Victor by the collar. There was no struggle. Victor went limp, his fight gone, his fear consuming him as Silas pulled the leather vest off his back and tossed it onto the floor at Gabriel's boots. The patch hit the tiles with a dull slap that echoed through the room like a death sentence. Victor sank to his knees. Sweat dripped down his face. "Please," he whispered, "please don't banish me." Gabriel crouched, bringing his face level with Victor's. "You're not being banished." His voice lowered into something lethal. "You're being erased." Victor's breath hitched. "Gabriel, Elena," Gabriel said without looking at her. "Bring her out." Elena hesitated, then opened the kitchen door. Maria stepped out, supported by the wall, her body trembling but her eyes sharp with something Victor hadn't expected from her: resolve. She walked toward Gabriel, stopping just behind him. Gabriel rose to his full height. "Look at her," he ordered. Victor lifted his eyes. Maria flinched but held her ground. "You did this," Gabriel said, pointing to her bruises. "You nearly killed your child. You nearly broke her spirit." Victor's lips trembled. Words failed him. Gabriel stepped aside so Maria could see him fully, and then, unexpectedly, he looked at Elena. "You protected her when no one else would," he said, "and because of that she's alive." Elena swallowed. The compliment hit harder than she expected. Gabriel turned back to Victor. "You're done," he said. "No patch, no crew, no protection, no family." Victor collapsed forward, his forehead touching the floor. Gabriel didn't look at him again. He motioned to his riders. "Take him outside. Two men hauled Victor to his feet. His boots scraped across the tiles as he sobbed, his voice fading as they dragged him through the door and into the blinding sunlight outside. When the door slammed shut, the diner exhaled as one. Gabriel looked at Elena. She met his gaze, steady this time, no longer the frightened waitress who had stepped in front of a monster without knowing what would come next. "You did the right thing," Gabriel said. Then, with a voice that carried the weight of 70 engines waiting outside, he added, "And now we protect you." The sunlight outside hit Victor like a punishment. As the door swung open, the harsh white glare spilled across the parking lot, illuminating the line of 70 Harleys waiting in dead silence. Engines rested, but the men on them sat still as statues, eyes fixed on the doorway where Victor was dragged out. A man stripped of power, stripped of identity, stripped of the only family he had ever claimed. Silas and another rider pushed him forward until he stumbled into the dust. The heat rippled off the pavement, and Victor lifted his arm to shield his eyes from the sun, blinking wildly as if the world had become too bright, too real. Inside the diner, Gabriel didn't watch him go. He simply stood with his back to the door, letting the moment pass like an execution already completed. His focus was on Elena and Maria, a waitress holding herself together by sheer will, and a bruised pregnant woman who could barely stay upright. Maria sagged against the booth, one hand gripping the table. Gabriel stepped toward her, his voice low but steady. "You're safe now." Her breath shook. "I didn't think you'd come." Gabriel's jaw tensed. "I should have seen it sooner." He gently touched her arm, guiding her into the sunlight where Silas waited, expression softening at the sight of her. Elena watched it all, her heartbeat still pounding, though the danger had passed. The diner felt different now, like the air had shifted, like the walls had swallowed one story and were preparing for another. Gabriel turned to her. For a moment, she felt exposed under his gaze, not threatened, but seen, and that was somehow even more overwhelming. "You protected her when no one else did," he said. "Not even my own men got there before you." Elena tried to speak, but her throat tightened. "I didn't think, I just couldn't let him hurt her again. That's why it mattered," Gabriel said. "Courage isn't loud, it's what you did." A few customers peeked cautiously from their seats. Others stared openly at Elena, as though she had transformed into someone they had never noticed before. Gabriel continued, "You're coming with us." Elena blinked. "What?" "You and Maria," he clarified. "Victor won't stop. Not now. Not after this." His voice lowered into a controlled growl. "We'll move you both to a safe place until we're sure he can't touch either of you." Elena glanced toward the ruined kitchen door, toward the dent Victor had left in the metal. She pictured him breaking it down, grabbing Maria, and dragging her into whatever nightmare he had planned. She also pictured something else. She remembered dialing Gabriel. She remembered the engines. She remembered the moment the world shifted when 70 bikers arrived, not as a threat, but as a shield. She nodded. "Okay." Outside, the riders straightened as Gabriel stepped through the doorway, the sunlight catching the silver in his beard, the patches on his cut, the authority in every movement. He didn't need to shout, "Form up," he said. 70 helmets turned, 70 boots hit the ground, and a perfect formation opened down the center of the lot, creating a protected path for Elena and Maria to walk through. Elena stood at the threshold, the sun hot against her skin. For the first time in years, she didn't feel small. She felt protected. She stepped into the light. The heat outside wrapped around Elena the moment she stepped through the doorway, but it wasn't the sun that made her breath catch. It was the sight waiting for her in the parking lot. 70 riders forming two perfect lines, engines silent, eyes forward, patches gleaming beneath the daylight like crests of an army called for war. Maria stepped carefully beside her, leaning slightly on Elena for balance. Silas approached first, his expression softening as he glanced at Maria's bruised cheek. "We'll take care of you," he said. "Both of you." Elena held Maria a little tighter. The offer wasn't gentle, it was absolute. Gabriel walked ahead of them, the sun catching his shadow as it stretched long across the pavement. He didn't need to look back to know they were following. Every rider along the path adjusted their stance, subtle shifts, protective angles, an unspoken message carved into daylight. No one touches them. No one tries. As Elena and Maria passed between the rows of bikers, the men inclined their heads, not a bow, but a silent acknowledgement. Respect, recognition. Elena felt it like a wave moving under her feet, pushing her forward. Maria whispered shakily, "They're doing all this for me?" Elena answered quietly, "For both of us." Gabriel stopped beside a black SUV parked at the front of the formation. Its door was already open, air conditioning humming softly. "Maria, you ride with Silas," he said. "He'll take you straight to the safe house." Maria hesitated. "Gabriel, I'm sorry. I didn't want any of this." Gabriel stepped closer, his voice gentler than before. "None of this is your fault. You only ever needed protection. You have it now." Silas guided Maria into the passenger seat with surprising tenderness, adjusting the seatbelt so it didn't press against her stomach. When the door closed, Elena felt a small part of her tension ease. Gabriel turned to her next. "You," he said, "are coming with me." Elena blinked. "Why me?" "Because you put yourself in front of him." His expression hardened. "Victor won't take that lightly." Elena opened her mouth, but before she could protest, the riders behind them started their engines. The sound rolled across the street in perfect unison, one enormous controlled roar that shook the hot air and made a few neighbors step back into their homes. Gabriel's voice cut through the noise. "Get in!" She climbed onto the back of his Harley, the leather warm from the sun. Her hands hovered awkwardly above his waist until he reached back and gently pulled her arms around him. "You'll want to hold on," he said. The engine surged. Dust rose. Sunlight flashed across chrome, and as the formation closed around them, Elena realized this wasn't an escort. It was a shield, a moving wall of steel and conviction built because she had chosen to stand between a woman and the man who wanted to break her. Gabriel revved the engine once. "Let's move!" The entire formation launched forward, roaring down the sunlit road in a rolling wave of thunder that swallowed the diner, the street, the fear, everything Elena had ever known. She gripped Gabriel tighter. This was the moment her old life disappeared behind her as the world she never expected opened in front of her. The convoy tore down the sunlit highway like a moving fortress. Elena felt the pavement hum beneath them, the vibration of Gabriel's Harley traveling up her arms as she held on tightly. Wind whipped against her skin, sharp but clean, carrying a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in years. Every time she glanced to the side, a wall of riders stretched in perfect formation, chrome flashing in the daylight, mirrored glasses catching the sun like warning signals. No one on that road dared come close. Cars slowed. Some pulled onto the shoulder entirely as 70 bikers swept past like a tide of controlled fury. Elena wasn't sure whether she should be terrified or grateful. Maybe both. But with every mile, the fear she'd carried for so long loosened its hold just a little more. Up ahead, the convoy slowed as Gabriel veered off the highway, taking a side road winding through fields dotted with leaning oaks. The sunlight filtered through the branches, warm and golden, painting patterns across the asphalt. It felt unreal, like she'd been lifted out of her old life and dropped into a world where the rules were written on engine noise and loyalty instead of fear. They turned into a wide ranch property surrounded by a white fence. A massive farmhouse sat at its center, its porch lined with chairs, water jugs, and piles of folded blankets. The place felt alive, like a refuge built from years of quiet preparations. Gabriel cut his engine, and the rest followed, creating an abrupt silence that made Elena's ears ring. She swung her leg off the bike, trying not to stumble as her legs adjusted. Silas was already helping Maria from the SUV. Her face was pale, but her steps were steadier now. She looked around the property with wide, stunned eyes. "This is one of our safe houses," Silas said. "No one comes here unless Gabriel says so. Not members, not prospects, no one." Maria exhaled shakily, as if she was only now letting herself believe she had found safety. Elena turned to Gabriel. "What happens now? We keep you hidden until Victor stops trying to tear the world apart looking for her," he replied, "and until I'm sure you're safe." Elena frowned slightly. "He'll come after me too?" Gabriel met her eyes. "You embarrassed him. Men like him don't forget that." A cold shiver ran down her spine, but it wasn't the paralyzing fear she'd known before. It was awareness. The difference between being hunted and being protected. A group of biker wives approached from the house, sunlight bouncing off their bracelets and sunglasses. At the front was Nora Briggs, a woman with sun-streaked blonde hair, sharp eyes, and a confidence that didn't need to be loud. She walked straight to Elena. "You must be the waitress who made Gabriel drop everything." Elena almost laughed. "I didn't make him do anything. I just tried to help." "That," Nora said, "is exactly why you're here." She extended her hand. "Welcome to the Shield Sisters." Behind her, more women stepped forward, strong, grounded, carrying first aid kits, warm smiles, and the kind of energy that comes only from people who have survived and rebuilt. Elena looked from them to Gabriel, to Maria gripping Silas's arm. For the first time, she didn't feel like an outsider in the middle of chaos. She felt like she had just stepped into the beginning of something. Nora led Elena and Maria up the porch steps, her boots thudding softly on the sun-warmed wood. From inside the house drifted the smells of fresh coffee and something baking. Cinnamon, sugar, comfort. The thick daylight pouring through the windows softened everything it touched, as if the house itself was determined to ease every wound brought through its doors. "This place," Nora said, pushing open the door, "has held more broken women than you'd believe. It's where we put people back together." Maria walked slowly, one hand on her belly, the other gripping the doorframe for balance. When she stepped inside, her breath caught. The living room was quiet, orderly, filled with soft blankets, spare clothes, stacks of bottled water, and a large dining table covered in medical supplies. A sanctuary built not from fear but from preparation. Silas helped Maria onto the couch, adjusting a pillow behind her back. Nora immediately went to work, checking for bruises, speaking softly, her voice carrying the steady confidence of someone who had done this far too many times. Maria's hands trembled as she let herself be cared for. Elena lingered near the doorway, unsure whether she belonged in this place or simply happened to arrive during the storm. Nora looked up at her. "Don't stand there like you're intruding. You saved her life. That makes you family." The word family sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. Gabriel entered last, shutting the door behind him with a quiet finality. The sound carried the weight of a vow that no harm would cross this threshold. He scanned the room, taking in Maria's exhausted posture, Elena's hesitation, Nora's steady hands. His gaze softened, just barely. "Victor will be looking for her," he said, directing the words to Nora, "and he'll come hard." Nora nodded. "Let him come. We're ready." Gabriel turned to Elena. "You need to stay here too, at least until I know he's not coming after you." Elena frowned. "I thought Victor only wanted Maria." Gabriel stepped closer, the sunlight framing his shoulders. "You humiliated him. You refused to move. Men like Victor don't forget the one who stood in their way." The truth landed like a weight in her stomach. "But you're not alone," Gabriel said. "Not anymore." Nora motioned Elena toward the kitchen. "Come on, let me show you how this works." Inside, a group of women, some older, some younger, all wearing clothes that moved easily, were preparing supplies. One woman arranged burner phones, another sorted emergency cash into envelopes, another placed keys on a board labeled safety vehicles. Elena stared. "You do this?" Regularly, Nora smiled sadly, more often than we should. A younger woman with dark curls approached Elena. "We're the Shield Sisters," she said. "We protect women who can't protect themselves, sometimes from strangers, sometimes from the men they once loved, sometimes from monsters they married." Elena swallowed. "And you trust me to help?" Nora answered without hesitation. "You already did help. You stepped between a pregnant woman and a man who wanted to own her. That's what we do." Maria's voice drifted from the living room, soft, cracked, hopeful. "Elena?" She turned. Maria held out her hand. "Thank you." Elena crossed the room and took it gently. In that sun-washed moment, surrounded by people she didn't know but somehow already trusted, Elena felt something shift inside her. It wasn't fear, it wasn't adrenaline, it was purpose. And she understood for the first time why Gabriel had told her she wasn't alone, because she wasn't. Not anymore. Elena didn't sleep that night, not because she wasn't safe, she was for the first time in years, but because the house around her pulsed with a quiet intensity she'd never experienced. Even in the dark, Shield Sisters moved through the hallways like practiced guardians, checking locks, whispering updates, brewing coffee for the long hours ahead. Outside, riders took shifts under the porch lights, engines cooling in the moon-washed dirt, their silhouettes unmoving as statues. By dawn, sunlight spilled across the ranch, turning the fields gold. Elena stepped outside, the morning air cool on her skin. The roar from the night before felt distant now, replaced by birdsong and the faint rustle of wind through the oak trees, but calm didn't mean stillness. A woman wearing a denim jacket, Lena, one of the younger Shield Sisters, hurried across the yard, a burner phone pressed to her ear. Her expression tightened. "Are you sure?" "Okay, keep eyes on her. We're on our way." She hung up and jogged toward Nora, who was organizing medical supplies in open daylight, as casually as if she were preparing a Sunday picnic. When Nora heard the update, her jaw clenched. "What happened?" Elena asked. Nora turned to her. "Another one, a woman in the next town over, ran into a convenience store this morning with her kid in her arms, said her boyfriend locked her in a trailer all night." Elena felt her throat tighten. "Is she safe now?" "She will be." Nora grabbed a go-bag from the porch. "We're heading out." She glanced at Elena. "You should come." Elena hesitated. "Me? Why?" "Because you need to understand what this is," Nora said gently. "What you stepped into when you stood up to Victor. We don't just rescue women once, we stay with them, guide them, protect them until they can breathe on their own again." Elena didn't need more convincing. She followed Nora to the SUV where two riders, helmets already on, revved lightly at the gate. They drove into the sunlight-drenched town nearby, a place that looked ordinary on the outside, its quiet streets and blooming front yards disguising the storm inside one of its small convenience stores. When they arrived, a frightened woman stood behind the counter, clutching her little girl so tightly that the child's feet dangled above the ground. Her clothes were torn, her face streaked with dirt. She flinched at every sound. Nora approached slowly, palms open, voice calm. "My name is Nora. You're safe. He can't get to you here." The woman's lips trembled. "He said he'd find me. He always finds me." Nora placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Not today." Elena watched from a distance, something heavy blooming in her chest, not fear but recognition. This woman, Maria, herself, all echoes of one another. The little girl looked up at Elena with wide, scared eyes. Elena crouched down, offering a soft smile. "Do you like pancakes?" The child sniffed and nodded. "We have lots at our house," Elena said. "And syrup?" For the first time, the girl loosened her grip. By the time Nora escorted them into the SUV, a new understanding settled over Elena like sunlight warming chilled skin. This wasn't a shelter. This was a lifeline, a network, a quiet army built from survivors who refused to let anyone suffer alone, and she was now part of it. The SUV rolled back onto the ranch, just as the sun climbed high, bathing everything in warm brightness. Dust swirled behind the tires, catching the light like tiny sparks. The rescued woman held her daughter close as Nora guided them up the porch steps. Shield sisters were already inside, preparing a spare bedroom, opening windows to let the morning breeze soften the air. Elena helped carry supplies to the doorway. Blankets, clean clothes, bottles of water. As she handed them off, she caught a glimpse of the little girl sitting on the couch, her tiny hands wrapped around a bowl of cereal, legs swinging nervously. It struck Elena how quickly safety could soften terror, how even the smallest kindness could change the shape of someone's world. Gabriel stood outside with Silas and a few riders, sunlight glinting off their patches as they spoke in low, tense tones. He looked up the moment Elena stepped onto the porch. Something unreadable flickered in his eyes. Relief, curiosity, maybe even respect. "You went with them," he said. Elena nodded. "I needed to see it. What do you all do?" "And what do you think?" Gabriel asked, folding his arms. "That no one should have to do it," Elena replied softly. "But I'm glad someone does." Gabriel's expression shifted, the hardness around his features easing. "Most people look away. Pretend they don't hear screams next door. Pretend bruises explain themselves." He glanced toward the house. "But you didn't." Elena looked at her hands, still faintly trembling. "I wasn't brave. I was scared the whole time." "So was she," Gabriel said. "So were all of them. Courage isn't not scared. Courage is choosing to stand there anyway." Before Elena could answer, Nora stepped onto the porch. "We need to talk." Gabriel straightened. "What's wrong?" Nora exchanged a quick look with Silas, then met Gabriel's eyes. "Victor's been spotted." Elena felt the air leave her lungs. "Where?" Gabriel asked, voice sharpening. "2 towns over," Nora said. "He's asking questions, showing people Maria's picture, telling them she ran off with someone. He's angry, he's looking for her." Silas muttered a curse under his breath. Gabriel's jaw flexed, but he didn't raise his voice. "How close? Close enough that we intercepted 2 calls about a wild-eyed man banging on doors." Nora tilted her head. "He's unraveling." Elena felt a cold shiver travel down her spine. She thought of the dent in the diner door, the way he'd said her name like a threat, the darkness in his eyes. Gabriel stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Listen to me, Elena. This isn't your fault. You didn't put Maria in danger. Victor did, and now he's desperate." "What does that mean for us?" Elena whispered. "It means," Gabriel said, "we tighten the shield." Within minutes, riders moved like a silent machine, checking the perimeter, adjusting patrol shifts, parking bikes where the road dipped into view. A sense of calm urgency swept through the ranch. Everyone knew their role. Everyone understood the stakes. Elena stood on the porch, watching the Shield sisters usher the rescued mother and child into a bedroom, hearing their soft reassurances floating down the hallway. She felt it again, that shift inside her, the one that told her she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was becoming part of something bigger. Something that didn't run from danger, something that ran toward it, to save the ones who couldn't, and she understood now why Gabriel had said she belonged here. Because this wasn't the end of her story, it was the beginning of her calling. Morning stretched into afternoon as the ranch settled into a tense but focused rhythm. The women inside cooked, cleaned, checked wounds, whispered comfort. Outside, the bikers moved like a living perimeter, engines cooling under the sun, boots crunching gravel, eyes scanning the empty road stretching beyond the gate. By midday, heat shimmered off the fields, turning the horizon into a wavering line of gold. Elena stood beneath the shade of the porch roof, watching the bikers rotate shifts with military precision. Every few minutes, a rider passed by with a nod, acknowledging her presence, not as a stranger, but as someone who had earned a place among them. Gabriel returned from a short patrol, dust clinging to his boots, sunlight catching the silver in his beard. Elena could see the exhaustion in the lines around his eyes, the weight of responsibility pressing heavily on his shoulders. But he carried it with the quiet steadiness of a man who had been doing this long before she ever arrived. He came to stand beside her. "You holding up?" She let out a breath she didn't fully realize she was holding. "Better than I thought I would. That's because you're stronger than you think." He glanced toward the house. "Maria won't forget what you did." Elena swallowed hard. "She shouldn't have needed saving. None of them should." Gabriel nodded slowly. "But they do, and when they do, there has to be someone willing to stand in the fire." Elena looked up at him. "Like you?" Gabriel's eyes softened. "Like us." A horn sounded from the far end of the property, 2 short blasts, not alarm but signal. Riders began streaming toward the yard, forming a loose semicircle, their shadows stretched long across the ground. Dust rose in thick clouds as engines ignited, one after another, until the air vibrated with a low, unified growl. Elena stepped forward in confusion. "What's happening?" Gabriel turned to her with a faint smile. "Today is about something bigger than Victor, bigger than danger. It's about respect." Nora joined them, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "It's time." "For what?" Elena asked. Nora placed a hand on her shoulder. "For them to honor what you did." Before Elena could speak, a line of riders parted down the middle, creating a clear path that led into the open yard. The rumble quieted, not fully silenced, but softened, controlled. From the opposite end of the formation, a black Harley with chrome handlebars rolled slowly into view. The rider dismounted with a practiced ease. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his cut marked with patches Elena had never seen before, signifiers of rank and respect that carried weight even in silence. Gabriel's posture straightened. "State President is here." Elena felt her pulse quicken. This wasn't a casual visit. This was ceremony. Ryder Callahan approached, his boots crunching on gravel. Sunlight illuminated him like a frame, turning the dust behind him into a halo. He stopped in front of Elena, studying her with steady, discerning eyes. "So," he said, his voice rich and calm, "this is the Waitress." Elena felt her cheeks flush. "My name is Elena Ward." "I know who you are," Ryder said. "I've heard everything." The bikers around them stood in respectful silence. Even the wind seemed to pause. Ryder continued, "Most people run when they see the kind of man Victor Torres becomes. You didn't. You stood in his path. You protected a woman who couldn't protect herself, a woman carrying the child of one of our own." Elena's throat tightened. "That kind of courage," Ryder said, "deserves more than words." He turned to Nora, who approached holding something folded over her arm, white leather trimmed with red stitching. Sunlight glinted off the embroidery. Nora handed it to Ryder. Then Ryder unfolded it slowly. A vest, a white one, a color reserved only for the most honored women in their world. Across the back, in curved, bold lettering, was one word: Untouchable. Elena's breath caught. Ryder stepped closer, holding the vest for her to see. "This isn't a patch," he said. "It's a promise. From us, from all 70 men standing here." The riders around them lowered their heads in silent acknowledgement. Ryder continued, "As long as you wear this, no one touches you, no one threatens you, no one lays a hand on you without answering to us." He extended the vest toward her. "Today, Elena Ward, we make you untouchable." The yard fell completely silent. Elena's vision blurred, not with fear this time, but with something overwhelming, something she hadn't expected to feel: belonging. Her hands trembled as she reached for the vest. When her fingers closed around the warm leather, the riders erupted, engines revving all at once, creating a roar so powerful the earth vibrated beneath her feet. Gabriel leaned toward her, voice low enough only she could hear. "You earned this!" The sun blazed overhead. Dust rose in swirling halos around her. 70 riders lifted their fists in her honor, and Elena Ward stood at the center of it all, holding the vest that would change everything. The engines eventually quieted, but the energy in the air didn't fade. It shifted, settling into something deeper, something that hummed beneath the skin long after the roar had died. Elena stood in the yard, the white vest draped over her arms, sunlight turning its red stitching into a burning halo. For a long moment, she couldn't move, she could barely breathe. Then Gabriel stepped behind her, his hands gentle as he lifted the vest and settled it onto her shoulders. The leather was warm from the sun, heavier than she'd expected, heavier with meaning, with responsibility, with a promise that 70 men had just carved into broad daylight. When he finished adjusting the collar, he stepped back. "How does it feel?" Elena swallowed. "Like I'm standing someplace I was never supposed to reach." Gabriel shook his head. "You reached it because you deserved it." Around them, riders began to reform their lines, engines rumbling back to life in preparation for the final escort. Nora approached, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Maria's ready," she said. "We'll keep her close. She's safe now." Elena turned to see Maria stepping onto the porch, hand resting on her belly, eyes shining with unshed tears. She walked over slowly, sunlight stretching across her bruised skin like a quiet blessing. "You saved me," Maria whispered. "If you hadn't been there," Elena shook her head. "You saved yourself when you walked into that diner. I just opened the door." Maria's lips trembled into a smile, the first real one Elena had seen from her. She took Elena's hands, squeezing them with surprising strength. "Thank you." The moment broke something open inside Elena, a place that had been locked for years, sealed by fear and survival. For the first time, she understood what Gabriel and Nora had meant. This wasn't just rescue, it wasn't just protection, it was transformation. A horn sounded. 3 short notes carried across the warm afternoon air. Ryder mounted his bike, raising a hand. "Form up, we ride!" One by one, engines thundered to life again. The ground vibrated underneath Elena's boots. Dust rose in swirling columns, and then Gabriel swung onto his Harley and looked back at her. "You're with me," he said. She climbed onto the bike behind him, her hands finding their place around his waist, the white vest brushing against the black leather of his cut. The contrast felt symbolic, light against shadow, new against old, promise against history. The formation closed around them, Maria and the Shield sisters at the center, flanked by riders on all sides, a moving wall of chrome and thunder. Ryder revved once. Gabriel followed. The entire convoy surged forward as one. They exploded onto the open road under the burning sun, sweeping across the highway in a synchronized wave that made cars pull aside, pedestrians stare, and the world itself pause. As the ranch disappeared behind them, Elena looked over her shoulder at the long trail of dust and roaring engines stretching into the horizon. Her old life was somewhere back there, quiet, lonely, fearful. This new one was loud, powerful, unbreakable. She tightened her grip on Gabriel as the wind whipped past her, warm and fierce, and understood the truth that would follow her for the rest of her life. She had walked into a diner as a waitress. She was riding out as something entirely different, Untouchable, and as Elena rode beneath the afternoon sun, surrounded by 70 roaring engines and a promise stitched across her back, she stepped fully into the life she never knew she deserved. Thank you for sharing this journey of courage, compassion, unexpected family. If Elena's story moved you, make sure to subscribe to Heart Tales so you never miss the next chapter of the human spirit. Tell us in the comments which moment hit you the hardest. We read every word, and when you're ready, another story is waiting for you on the end screen. Let the road continue there.